13 years. For 13 years, my home was my sanctuary. The one place on earth I could be unapologetically myself. Sports bra, messy bun, and all. Then Brenda moved in across the street, and with one knock, one accusation, she didn't just shatter my peace. She tried to steal my very right to exist comfortably in my own skin, within my own four walls. My name is Lisa, and this is the story of the day my 13-year sanctuary, my home, was shattered by a new neighbor, and her husband's wandering eyes. The June sun in our suburban slice of heaven always had a way of muscling its way in, a relentless, unapologetic heat that seeped through even the most diligently drawn blinds. The oak floorboards were warm chow-chow beneath my bare feet, a fine mist of cleaning day dust motes dancing in the slanted sunbeams, a silent ballet only I was privy to. I lived for days like this. My 90s alt-rock playlist, the soundtrack of a rebellious youth now repurposed for domestic drudgery, was blasting from my trusty old Bluetooth speaker, loud enough to drown out the determined roar of the vacuum cleaner, my partner in grime. And there I was, Lisa, in my undefeated cleaning uniform, a navy blue sports bra, faded from countless battles with household chaos, and a pair of soft, worn-in cotton shorts? The kind you only wear when you're absolutely certain no prying eyes will witness your sartorial surrender to comfort. Sweat glistened on my forehead, a few errant strands of brown hair escaping the messy bun-eyed, hastily piled allergia atop my head. This was my kingdom, my fortress. 13 years. 13 years I'd called this two-story colonial home, long enough for every scuff on the floor, every slightly chipped paint fleck on the wall, to whisper a memory, to be an ingrained part of my personal history. Neighbors had come and gone, like seasons, but the peace within these four walls, with the little garden I'd painstakingly cultivated out back, had been a comforting constant, or so I'd foolishly believed. The knock on the door, when it came, was 3 sharp, distinct raps, abrupt, and somehow urgent. Strange. I wasn't expecting a delivery, nor any visitors. Mark, my husband, my rock, was away on a business trip, not due back until the weekend. I jabbed the pause button on my music, and the vacuum whined into silence. My heart gave a little, involuntary flutter, that primal ping of unease, when familiar quiet is unexpectedly breached. Wiping my damp hands on the hem of my shorts, I padded to the door, peering through the peephole. A woman, probably around my age, maybe a few years younger, stood on the porch. Blonde, a chic bob haircut that probably cost a fortune, and dressed in what looked like an expensive floral sundress and espadrille wedges. Her face was pretty, conventionally so, but there was a tightly wound tension around her bright blue eyes. I'd never seen her before. Must be the new occupant of the house across the street, the one the elderly Petersons had finally sold after decades. I took a deep breath, trying to conjure a neighborly smile despite my current battle-ready state of disarray. Easing the door open a crack, I offered, "Hi there, can I help you?" "Hello," she replied, her voice a little too high-pitched, a little too saccharine. "I'm Brenda. I just moved in across the street." She gestured vaguely with a perfectly manicured hand towards the cream-colored house with the white picket fence, the one where I could still vividly picture old Mr. Peterson tending his roses every morning. "Oh, welcome to the neighborhood," I said, forcing a warmth I didn't quite feel yet, but aiming for politeness. "I'm Lisa. It's nice to meet you. Sorry about my appearance. I'm in the middle of a serious cleaning offensive." I offered a self-deprecating chuckle, hoping she'd understand the universal plight of the deep clean. Brenda didn't return the smile. The thin, polite veneer on her lips vanished, replaced by a startlingly severe expression. Her blue eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of my body, from my messy bun down to my bare feet, lingering for an uncomfortably long moment on my sports bra and shorts, before flicking away as if she'd just witnessed something profoundly distasteful. A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a friendly, "Hello." "Actually," she began, her voice now stripped of any pretense of friendliness, carrying an edge that set my teeth on edge. "I came over because there's something I need to discuss with you." "What's that?" I asked, my eyebrows arching slightly. My internal alarm bells, usually pretty dormant in this quiet cul-de-sac, were starting to jingle. And then, she dropped the bombshell. A conversational grenade, lobbed with casual disdain. "You make me uncomfortable." I blinked, processing. Did I hear that right? "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice a little breathless. "The way you dress," she stated flatly, without a hint of hesitation, her tone that of a disapproving headmistress addressing a particularly wayward pupil. "When you're cleaning your house." "My husband, he's been seeing you from our window, and it's making me uncomfortable." A thick, suffocating silence descended. I could hear the distant buzz of a lawnmower, the rustle of leaves in the ancient maple tree that shaded my front yard. But inside my head, everything had screeched to a halt. Uncomfortable? Because I was wearing a sports bra and shorts inside my own damn house. After 13 years of unremarkable, peaceful existence here, this was a first. Someone, a complete stranger, was standing on my doorstep, dictating my indoor attire while I was engaged in the decidedly unglamorous act of scrubbing my own floors. The initial shock quickly gave way to a wave of disbelief, then a simmering, indignant anger. I glanced down at myself. Yes, it wasn't exactly church attire, but it was perfectly functional for sweating it out indoors. "You mean this outfit?" I asked, my voice impressively steady, though a tremor of outrage was beginning to vibrate through me. I gestured to my sports bra, then my shorts. "Yes," Brenda confirmed, her lips pursed, her expression unwavering in its judgment. "It's inappropriate." "Inappropriate," I echoed, a dangerous note of incredulity creeping into my tone. "This is my home, Brenda. I'm in my private space." "I hardly think I'm bothering anyone." I was fighting to maintain a veneer of calm, but the sheer audacity of her pronouncement was making my blood boil. "If someone is uncomfortable, perhaps that's their problem, not mine." Brenda took a sharp, audible breath, as if steeling herself. "Look, Lisa, I don't want to cause any trouble, but my husband is a man. You understand what I mean?" "You, dressed like that? Parading around your house with your curtains not fully drawn? It's like an invitation." "An invitation?" My voice cracked, jumping an octave. "Are you kidding me right now? An invitation for whom? I'm cleaning my own house. And for your information, my curtains are almost always drawn. I leave a small gap for natural light. A sliver of daylight, Brenda, not a peep show solicitation for voyeurs." My patience, already stretched thin, snapped. The way she spoke, as if I were deliberately exhibiting myself, as if the fault lay with me and not with her husband's questionable pastime, it was more than I could stomach. It was classic victim blaming, and I wasn't about to stand there and take it. "Perhaps," I said, my voice now ice cold, my gaze locking with her widening blue eyes, "you should go home and have a serious conversation with your husband. Perhaps you should be asking him why he's spending his time staring into a neighbor's window instead of, oh, I don't know, minding his own business. Because that, Brenda, is what's truly weird and disturbing." I enunciated each word with chilling precision. "You should be checking your husband, not coming over here and telling me how to dress in my own home." Brenda's face contorted. It went from pale to splotchy red, then a deep, furious purple. The carefully constructed elegance she'd presented moments before shattered, revealing something ugly and volatile underneath. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. "You're incredibly rude, so inconsiderate. I am not going to let this go." She started waving her hands, her volume escalating, clearly intending to create a public spectacle. I drew myself up to my full height, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm just speaking the truth, Brenda. Now, if you have nothing else to say, I have floors to finish." I made to close the door, but she shot out a hand, her perfectly manicured nails digging slightly into the wood, blocking its path. "Who do you think you are, lecturing me?" she screeched, spittle flying, nearly hitting my face. "You just wait. This isn't over." I yanked the door, slamming it shut in her furious face, the sound echoing through the suddenly too quiet house. I leaned back against it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking, not from fear, not entirely, but from a potent cocktail of rage and disbelief at the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of what had just transpired. For a long moment, I stood frozen, trying to process. A total stranger had just invaded my sanctuary, critiqued my clothing, and implicitly blamed me for her husband's peeping Tom tendencies. It was surreal. It was insulting. It was infuriating. I paced the living room, the feeling of violation clinging to me like a second skin. My home, my safe haven, suddenly felt tainted. The thought of some anonymous man across the street, leering at me through his window, made my skin crawl. Not because of what I was wearing, that was irrelevant, but because of his actions. His behavior was the problem here, not my choice of comfortable cleaning attire. I walked to my front window, cautiously parting the heavy drapes. Just as I'd said, they were mostly closed, leaving only a narrow vertical slit for light. It was barely enough for a determined cat to peer through, certainly not enough for anyone to get a clear view of anything unless they were actively, deliberately, and probably aidedly spying. I glanced across at their house. Their curtains were drawn too. Was he using binoculars? The thought sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. The initial fury began to subside, slowly replaced by a gnawing unease and a creeping anxiety. This woman, Brenda, was clearly unhinged. And if her husband was, in fact, a voyeur, then this wasn't just a petty neighborhood squabble. This had the potential to be something far more sinister. The first thing I did was call Mark. His voice, usually so jovial, was laced with concern as I recounted the entire bizarre episode, from Brenda's saccharine introduction to her venomous parting shot. "Are you okay, Lisa?" he asked, his deep, steady tone a balm to my frayed nerves. Did he actually do anything? Did she make any specific threats? "I'm okay, just livid, Mark, and a little creeped out," she said. "This isn't over." I don't know what she means by that, but it didn't sound like an invitation to a block party. "Listen to me," Mark said, his voice firm. "First thing, make sure all the doors and windows are locked. Double-check everything. I'll get home as soon as I possibly can, probably cut the trip short and be there by the weekend. Between now and then, if anything at all, makes you feel unsafe, you call 911 immediately. Don't hesitate. And Lisa," his voice softened, "you did absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing." Mark's words were an anchor in the storm of my emotions. At least I wasn't alone in this. After hanging up, I decided I couldn't just let this fester. Brenda wanted to make a scene? Fine. I'd make one too, but on my own terms, and through the proper channels. I called Carol, my dear neighbor from down the street, a kind, no-nonsense woman in her late 60s who'd lived in the neighborhood even longer than I had. She was a repository of local history in good sense. After I'd poured out the story, Carol let out a long, weary sigh. "Oh, Lisa, honey, sounds like you've got yourselves a classic Karen on your hands," she said, her voice tinged with a familiar exasperation. "Some people just can't fathom taking responsibility for their own, or their spouse's, shortcomings. You were right to tell her to check her husband, but be careful, dear. Those types can be vindictive and love to stir up trouble." She advised me to discreetly inform other trusted neighbors, just so everyone was aware and could keep an eye out. Safety first, Lisa. And it might not be a bad idea to file a police report, just to have it on record. Carol's advice was sound. I sent out a few carefully worded texts to a couple of other neighborhood friends, people I knew would be level-headed and supportive. Their reactions were unanimous: shock, indignation on my behalf, and unwavering support. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. At least I wasn't going to be ostracized in my own community. That afternoon, I drove to the local police precinct. Sitting in the sterile, chilly waiting room, I felt a little foolish, a little like I was overreacting. Reporting a neighbor for being rude and her husband for looking. But as I laid out the facts to a calm, professional female officer named Davis, she listened intently, her expression serious and understanding. "You did the right thing by coming in, ma'am," Officer Davis said, her pen scratching across a form. "The husband's behavior, if as you describe, could certainly be construed as voyeurism, and that's a serious concern. The wife's verbal aggression and implied threats are also noteworthy." They took a detailed report. While no immediate legal action could be taken based on this one incident, having an official record made me feel a sliver more secure. At least, if things escalated, there would be a documented starting point. My next step was to track down contact information for the owners of the house Brenda and her husband were renting. Luckily, I still had a good relationship with the Petersons. Mrs. Peterson was appalled when I told her what had happened and promised to speak to their property manager immediately. "We would never condone that kind of behavior in our property, Lisa. You can rest assured of that." She sounded genuinely distressed and supportive. The following days passed in a state of low-grade, simmering tension. I tried to go about my routines as normally as possible, but the feeling of being watched, of being under a hostile microscope, lingered like a bad taste. I kept my curtains drawn tighter than ever, leaving only the barest crack for light, and I found myself constantly scanning my surroundings whenever I stepped outside. The bizarre part was, I rarely, if ever, saw the husband. Just fleeting glimpses of him rushing to his car in the morning or hurrying inside in the evening. He looked ordinary, nondescript. But Brenda? Oh, Brenda was a different story. She seemed to possess a specialized Lisa detection radar. Every time I ventured out to water my drooping petunias, retrieve the mail, or even just crack a window for some fresh air, I could feel her eyes on me. A relentless, unblinking stare, filled with a mixture of scrutiny and animosity. It was like an invisible laser beam drilling into my back, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. Once, I was weeding my front flower bed, a therapeutic task I usually enjoyed. I looked up, and there she was, standing ramrod straight at her living room window, arms crossed, staring at me with an intensity that was genuinely unsettling. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch or look away. Instead, a slow, smug smirk spread across her face. The feeling was violating, as if I were an unwilling performer in a bizarre, one-woman show, and she was the sole, malevolent audience member. My house, my yard, my sanctuary, they no longer felt truly private. They had been contaminated by her unwarranted hostility. Then, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, via Carol, who heard it from Mrs. Henderson down the block, that Brenda had been spreading her own version of events. According to Brenda, I had been incredibly rude and had aggressively confronted her for no reason. Mrs. Henderson, a woman known for her love of gossip and a tendency to believe the most dramatic version of any story, apparently bought Brenda's tail, hook, line, and sinker. I noticed Mrs. Henderson started giving me cool, appraising looks, a distinct chill replacing her usual friendly wave. It was infuriating. The instigator was now playing the victim, and some people were actually falling for it. Mark came home that Friday, a day earlier than planned, and his presence was like a tangible shield. He listened to my updates, his jaw tightening as I described Brenda's relentless staring and her slander campaign. "This is unacceptable, Lisa," he said, his arms wrapping around me in a comforting hug. "You don't deserve to feel harassed in your own home." Saturday morning, Mark went outside while Brenda's husband was washing his car in their driveway. Mark, a man of few words but decisive action, had what he later described as a frank discussion with him. He didn't go into specifics, just said he'd made our position very clear regarding respect for privacy, personal boundaries, and the potential consequences of continued harassment. According to Mark, the husband seemed genuinely surprised, flustered, and stammered something about misunderstandings and just looking out the window. He neither confirmed nor denied the peeping, but he looked, in Mark's words, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. After that frank discussion, Brenda seemed to double down on her animosity. Her stares, if possible, became even more pointed, now laced with a venomous resentment. But at least the overt aggression seemed to cease. Perhaps knowing that I wasn't alone, that Mark was home, and that we had taken official steps, made her reconsider any further direct confrontation. My life, however, had irrevocably changed. That easy, unthinking comfort I once felt in my own home had been stolen. Every time I put on a comfortable old t-shirt or a pair of shorts indoors, a little voice, tinged with Brenda's judgmental tone, would whisper in the back of my mind. Even though I knew, deep down, that I was not in the wrong, the feeling of being judged, of having my privacy violated, lingered like a stubborn shadow. I still loved my house, my garden, but now, there was a subtle pall over its once untroubled peace. I was learning to live with it, to be more vigilant, perhaps even a little harder. I knew I had done nothing to invite this. I had every right to wear whatever I pleased within the confines of my own property. Every right to live peacefully without being subjected to leering eyes or baseless accusations. This whole bizarre, unsettling saga taught me a valuable, if unwelcome, lesson that sometimes you have to aggressively defend your boundaries, even if it means confronting utter irrationality, and that silence, in the face of such encroachment, is not always golden. Sometimes, it's an invitation for further disrespect, especially when your privacy and dignity are on the line. Brenda and her husband still live across the street. Her eyes still occasionally flick towards my house, cold and appraising, but now, when I catch her gaze, I no longer feel that jolt of fear or confusion. I meet it head on, my own stare steady, unwavering, because this is my home. This is my sanctuary. And I will not allow anyone to make me feel like a prisoner or an unwelcome guest within its walls ever again. I still leave that small gap in my curtains for the morning sun, because natural light is a beautiful, life-affirming thing, and I refuse to surrender my small joys because of someone else's perversion or neuroses. If Brenda's husband is still looking, well, that's his pathology, his problem, and ultimately, it's Brenda's problem to deal with, not mine. Absolutely, unequivocally, not mine. I've checked myself, and I know I'm okay. The issue, the real disturbing issue, lies firmly on the other side of the street. And I can only hope that, one day, they'll both take a long, hard look in their own damn mirror. Life in this quiet suburban enclave will probably never feel quite as idyllic as it once did. But I've found a new kind of peace, a more resilient, hard-won peace, forged in the crucible of this unwelcome conflict. And that, in its own way, feels like a victory. A quiet, defiant, very American kind of victory.